all back on campus. But until then, we'll continue to do our Zoom meetings and making sure that we connect in a different way. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this parent copy over to Carrie Bennett, our Associate Principal for Academics. And I think that it'll be a really great day of gaining some better understanding about how we assess and grade in our school. Carrie?
Great, thanks, Dave. Good morning, parents. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking out the window from my office out at the Tam, I think it's a reservoir inlet. I'm not even sure what the proper name is, but the sun is shining. The water is perfectly still. And I just got a pop-up on my phone that said hot advisory warning. So yes, it is hot out here and we're looking forward to some cooler weather. So today for our session, our norms, as always, when we're on Zoom, will be as follows. Please make sure that your mics are muted. That just helps us have a nice environment of quietness. If you have any questions, we encourage you to use the chat feature that's at the bottom of your screen. And over on the right side, if you open your chat, you'll be able to see the questions that are being asked. We will have moments where we stop and answer the questions that are coming in. So do feel free as those questions emerge that you just take the opportunity to pop them in. So before we begin, I'd like to do some introductions. So I think many of you now know my face if you've been to any of our high school presentations or our parent coffees. I do ask, though, that when you're able to come to campus that you do pop by and introduce yourself to me. I've been here now for just over a year, but unfortunately have not had the pleasure of meeting many parents face to face. We have two teachers that are going to be joining our presentation today. We have Josh Wood, who is a science teacher and also our teacher tech support, and Tim Best, science teacher and teacher tech support. So Josh is still working with kids. He'll be joining us in a minute, but I'm just going to invite Tim over to introduce himself. Tim?
Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Best. I teach honors bio this year and some junior and senior science electives like forensic science, and I'll have biotechnology in the spring. This is my third year at HKIS, and this year taking on some of the teacher tech support roles.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. So these are our session objectives today. We're hoping you're going to leave the hour with a better understanding of the high school's beliefs about how students learn. We want you to be able to understand some of our grading practices. And lastly, how we communicate student learning through our platform called Schoology. So we're going to walk through these three bullets today. Again, if you have questions along the way, please add them to the chat. So before we get started, if you've been at parent coffees before, we always start with a grounding. So our grounding today is going to be a trip down memory lane. So I need you to get into your high school self. Think back to the year that you graduated, grade 12. For me, that was 1992, with my big hair and my leg warmers and my blue eyeshadow. And I want you to think for a moment, and we're going to use the chat to share the answer to this question. So do have your chat available. What high school memories do you have about any of the following? Assessments, grading, grades, and report cards. So this could just be a word that comes to mind, or it could be a sentence or a very short story. So what comes to mind when you think of any of these things? Please add them to the chat. Navesh, thank you. Stress with a nice little happy face. Stress again. Oh, late nights. Oh yes, can remember those late nights. Report cards, many exams. Oh, Mr. Loveland, working hard to get extra credit. I earned extra credit by going to sporting events. Shayna, yes, memorization. That's one for me too. I was a memorizer in school, and that really didn't serve me well when I went off to college. GPAs, multiple digits, grades, college applications. Thank you. Friends. Nervousness. Someone had a quite stress-free in the Finnish system. Thank you, Nina, for sharing that. Hard work, studying for important exams, lots of last-minute cramming, note-taking, AP courses. Oh, it's so great to actually think back to when we were in high school. I appreciate the person that wrote friends. I feel like, although it's not linked to assessment and grading, but I remember having my favorite class was English because we got to work with friends and do a lot of collaboration. Marion, procrastination. Mr. Loveland, finishing homework at lunch, more procrastination. Thank you for sharing that. And the reason I wanted us to think back to that is I want us to put ourselves when we were in high school, and then we're going to have to kind of remove ourselves from that, because assessment, grading, grades and report cards actually look very different now than when we are in school. And as parents, I think we sometimes can find it quite confusing because we only have our own experiences to guide what we know. So it's different than when we went to school. It's very different. And I don't know about you, but I was starting to brainstorm all of the things I remember about grading and assessment when I was in high school. And these are some of the things that came to mind, right? At HKIS, we don't give zeros, but I remember friends who didn't hand homework in or assignments in got zeros. At HKIS, we don't factor homework into a final grade. I remember as a student, if I didn't get my homework done, the teacher was coming around the desks, I'd have a big black X or a 0 in the grade book. At HKIS, we don't penalize late work. How many of you remember maybe handing an essay in late or an assignment in late, and the first day was 10%, and the second day was 20%, and the third day was 30%, right? And so often that your grade that you got at the end of the year didn't reflect what you could do. It reflected actually your habits and your ability to be timely. At HKIS, we don't use bonus points or extra credit. And Mr. Loveland shared his memory of high school of remembering that he got extra credit simply because he went to a sporting event. I can remember in a school where a teacher gave students extra credit if they brought in Kleenex boxes. I'm not sure why the school wasn't providing those. At HKS, we don't rank. We don't rank our students. And many of you may have come from institutions that did that. We don't factor attendance into grades. So we do have attendance policy, right? Where we want students to be in class and we give so many absences, but we don't factor that into the final grade. And lastly, at HKS, we don't use grades as punishment or reward. And I can remember as a student as well, I feel that I was in that kind of system. So it's really important to kind of to remove yourself from your experience and to bring yourself here to HKS in 2021, that learning, reporting, grading does look different now. Thank you again to all the parents who shared some of their experiences. So I'm going to pass this over to Tim. He's going to talk now a little bit about our beliefs around grading and how we also approach student learning. Again, this will feel different maybe from your experience, but as he explains, he'll be explaining the why so that you get a sense of why things have changed when it comes to student learning. Tim?
Hello again. So just building off that last slide with the things that we kind of don't do here, I'd like to expand upon some of why we do those or don't do those things. So first, the idea that learning is a journey. No two students are the same. They may take different paths to get, to an end goal, like an end learning goal. It takes time, and like we as teachers try to work with each student to make sure that their pathway ends up at the same place, but it's not necessarily taking the same pathway as someone else, which I'll expand upon in a minute. We do want students to have a common experience, and we mean that in that anyone who takes, a given course, no matter who the teacher is, experiences a similar stuff. And I know that, as a teacher, we work hard to, amongst our teams, to make sure that we're using the same like learning activities and the similar assessments and everything. Behavior should not be mixed with grades. Ms. Bennett mentioned this before. Behaviors, think of like coming late to class or not turning in work on time. Like we want grades to be a reflection of what students know and are able to do, not whether or not they can turn things in on time. Students need practice before being evaluated. I'll bring this up in a minute, but bring up the idea of formative work as practice. Like we want students to have a way to work on what they're learning, thinking back to the journey, maybe get some get some things wrong. Like learning is about making mistakes, get some feedback on it and practice some more before being finally assessed with a summative assessment. Learning takes time, and the idea that averaging is not the best indicator of overall performance. So think of, as the year progresses, we want students to be constantly growing. If they started in one place and end at the end goal, that's great. They met our learning goals. But if we average what they did over the course of that year, that doesn't really indicate how good they were doing towards the end of the year. And I know Ms. Bennett will speak about this in a little while. Reassessment is sometimes needed to consolidate learning, meaning that if a student takes an assessment and doesn't necessarily perform up to, say, expectations, we should be able to reassess to show that growth has happened since getting feedback from that first assessment. If we think of school as kind of a map of a town, we want students to be able to think about where are they going, which is often, like a teacher has certain learning goals that we want students to know. So that's kind of where are we going? Let's say we're trying to get to the pool. You can kind of see the pool in the top middle of this town map. Different students start at different places. Some might start right next door at what is that, a train station? Or maybe they start down at the bottom where that big black arrow is. Either way, we want students to get to the same place. They might have to take a different path to get there. So our goal is to help them figure out the path to get to the goal. And that might involve, like I said before, a learning journey. It might involve reassessment. It might involve different levels of practice for different students. But the end goal is to get everyone to the same place. I'll pass it back to Ms. Bennett now.
Thank you, Tim. I hope that metaphor of the town is helpful. And I don't know about you, but when I remember being a student, everyone was doing exactly the same thing. And I was really good in English. And I became an English teacher. I really struggled in math. And I think about, in my experience, if I had had a school that believed that learning was a journey and that there's different pathways to get there, I think I actually would have been a lot more successful as a math student. And so I really appreciate the approach that we're taking, and many international schools now are taking. So as a parent, what can you expect to be the same in a course team? So, at the dinner table, if you have twins or triplets, of course, they're always comparing their classes. Or if you have your son or daughter's friends over for a dinner, they're always talking about their classes. So it's really important that as parents, we understand what's the same, what's the common experience. So as a parent, when you go into Schoology, and we'll talk about Schoology later in the presentation, when you go through each of your child's classes, you should feel that the formatting of the gradebook is, if not exactly the same, very, very similar. And we do that so that kids don't have to navigate different grade books and different classes, and as parents too, it's a common experience. The standards in a class will be the same. So no matter if you have a child in biology, no matter what teacher they have, they're using the same standards. And they have the same expectations of those standards for achievement. So our course teams use the same rubrics, and the teachers get together and they talk about expectations and calibration. And so when we're thinking about a 4 on the rubric, teachers understand what a 4 looks like, and they're sharing with kids what that looks like. And all course teams will have the same reassessment philosophy and opportunity. And so that's really important, that if all of our kids are in geometry, we're not having one reassessment policy in one class and a different in another class. So that's really what's the same when we're thinking about course teams and courses. So what might be different? So if you've been in Schoology, you will notice that teachers add narrative feedback to some assignments. So evidently that narrative feedback will look different depending on the teacher who is typing that into the feedback box. And different teachers may choose to give narrative feedback on different assignments. Sometimes assessment formats might look different. If you have a child in the middle school, you'll hear Connie talk a lot about student choice. And we have student choice in the high school as well. Sometimes assessments are, you're going to do it this way. but sometimes there's actually choice in how a student shows how they learn. So sometimes the assessment format may be a little bit different depending on the teacher. Lesson activities, sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different depending on a teacher's style. And of course, the art of teaching, right? Every teacher, like parents, we have our strengths and we have our areas for growth and a different style and different approaches. And so it may feel different in different classrooms based on who's teaching. But at the end of the day, what's really important is that no matter what class your child is in, if it's geometry, if it's Calc AB, if it's AP literature, they are getting a common experience. And that's important for parents to understand. So often parents ask us, what does feedback look like in a classroom? And so I almost wish we could have a parent day. I don't know how Tim feels about that as a teacher, but you know, Dave, Lauren, and I are in classrooms all of the time, giving teachers feedback, but we're also listening to the feedback that teachers are giving students. And feedback is happening all of the time in a classroom. And this is the kind of feedback that as a parent, you just don't see. That's why it's so important to be sitting with your child once in a while and asking them about their learning journey in their classes. The feedback that you do see as a parent, though, falls into two boxes. So in the red box, we have our approaches to learning. And in the blue box, we have our knowledge and skills. And how we give feedback about these two areas is different. So I'd like to take an opportunity just to explain the difference. So if you are returning to HKIS, if your child has come up from the middle school, these will look familiar. So our ATLs are the approaches to learning. We really feel it's important that we're giving students feedback on their learning habits. So remember what Tim said is that we don't punish students for their behaviors, right? We don't deduct late marks. We don't deduct marks if they're tardy to class. We don't deduct marks if maybe they're misbehaving or talking when they shouldn't be. These are all behaviors, but we want to give students feedback on those behaviors. So we have three categories that we give feedback to students on. Their self-motivated learning, right? How are they as a student? Do they reflect? Do they use feedback from the teachers? Do they show an intellectual curiosity and this desire to want to learn? Do they persevere through tough challenges and demonstrate that they have initiative and independence? Do they advocate for their learning? That's a hard one, and it's one that we actually work hard with our kids and we teach them. A 9th grader can't advocate the same way that a 12th grader can. So we actually give them based on just 3 words. We rarely see these in the classroom. We inconsistently see these, or we consistently see these. The second one is collaboration. So how, as a student, am I making connections with and working with other people? Am I accepting my roles in groups, and am I fulfilling those roles? And am I able to respectfully engage with students? And lastly, respect and responsibility, right? And this is that more behavior piece, that you're using the equipment with respect, you're demonstrating integrity, and you're contributing to a positive classroom environment. So you'll see a lot of our teachers use self-reflection as a way for kids to engage with these. So you'll see your child writing about these, about how they're doing and how they can improve. These actually appear on our report card 2 times in the course of the year, each at mid-semester. If you have any questions about these, certainly do talk with the teacher and talk with your child. But this is a great way to show how your child is learning. And this is actually great when it comes time for college recommendation letters, which our teachers are now furiously writing. Teachers talk about the work habits of the kids. Okay, so this was the red box. This was the approaches to learning. The second bit of feedback was the blue box. And this is the feedback to knowledge and skills. And these are the things that you'll actually see in the report card. So Josh is now with us. So I'm going to invite Josh Wood up. Josh, if you could first introduce yourself. And then Josh is going to talk us through what feedback looks like in the grade book and the kinds of notations that you can see. Okay, Josh.
Yeah. What do you want me to go through? Okay. Hi, everybody. So my name is Josh Wood. I am a teacher here in the high school, and I teach physics and math. We'll start talking about a bit about feedback and what that looks like, but then we'll transition later into how this is communicated on our learning management system, Schoology. So feedback comes in two forms in the high school. We have formative feedback and summative feedback. So in a nutshell, formative feedback helps myself as a teacher, faculty members, and your child understand where they are. It helps them kind of find a roadmap to where they want to be. And ultimately, it allows everybody, so myself as a teacher and your child, to make sure that we are going to be prepared for the summative assessments. Formative feedback, we have a scale that we start with, exemplifies. And just a note about formative feedback, we don't always use this category, but primarily you'll see in Schoology meeting expectations as a category, approaching expectations, developing expectations, and then if the assignment is missing, you'll see that noted on the assessment. Summative feedback, on the other hand, we use letter grades A, A-, B+, B, and then I know this is not perhaps, it's a little different than maybe your schooling, but we don't use B-, C+, we just go B, C, D, and then F.
All right, thank you so much, Josh. Oh, parents, we're going to actually now just take a pause. I don't know if you can hear the music in the background, but it's our come to class music. And I don't know, Josh, do you know what this song actually is? Last week it was this really obnoxious like cover tune, and today it's like opera.
I don't know, no.
Can you hear that, Mr. Loveland?
I can only hear it over my head, so I'm not sure anybody can hear it online. So,
Okay.
but our students choose the song every couple of weeks.
I'm actually appreciating the angels singing right now because last week's was a little grating on the ears. Actually, I think I can actually speak over this. So if you're new to the to HKIS, just a point on report cards. So you'll have 4 points in the year where the school will officially give you feedback on your child. Again, know that Josh is going to talk about our Schoology platform. And as a parent, you can go in anytime to Schoology and look at the feedback that your child is receiving. And we do encourage you to do that. If we go back to our grounding activity, when I asked about what were your high school memories around grading and reporting, I remember report cards being a really fearful moment in time because it was always a surprise, right? We didn't have these open grade books online. The grade book was private and it was in the teacher's, red binder that no student was allowed to look at. And I would just cross my fingers when it was report card time that I would get the grades that I thought I was getting. So we are very transparent with kids. We're transparent with families. There should never be a surprise. So at Q1, which is around I think it's the end of October, you'll be getting a report with just feedback on those approaches to learning. That's a great opportunity just to sit with your child and talk about their learning habits and how those habits are contributing to their success in the class. Q2, which is at the end of the first semester, so in December, there will be a temporary letter grade. And as Josh said, we don't use the full scale, but a temporary letter grade. If it's a full year class, if it's a semester class, that is the final grade. But most of our classes are full year, unless it's an elective. And it's really important to remember that that grade is just temporary. It's a checkpoint. It's where I am now, or where your child is now. And it allows for conversations to happen between the teacher and the student about what are those next steps on the learning journey. Then in Q3, which is around March, we're getting another report on approaches to learning. And then in Q4, at the end of the year, is a final letter grade. And that's the one that will go on the HKIS transcript. So one of the things last year I had a lot of parents asking was like, how does a teacher come up with that final letter grade? Most of us are coming from systems where averaging was used, right? And the problem with averaging is that it doesn't show where a student ended. So for example, if I started out as a C student in the first semester, and at the end of the semester, I was consistently showing A's on those same standards, with averaging, you would only ever be a B. So this is why we actually don't use mathematical formula to determine an overall letter grade. So to help explain this best, I thought it might be fun to kind of take you through a little bit of a metaphor, some storytelling that I hope helps understand why we use this approach. The story is, who should pack my parachute? I don't know how many of you have been parachuting. It's one of the things I refuse to do because I don't like the feel of falling. But I want you to imagine two students. We have Sally and we have Bobby, and they're both in parachuting school. They are avid. They want to jump out of a plane and they just want to parachute. And they're learning how to pack their parachute. So let's begin with Sally. The teacher is using formative assessment, giving opportunities for practice as we go along. So for Sally over here, in week 1, she's able to practice. And when it comes time for the summative assessment at the end of week 1, she's able to pack her backpack successfully 3 out of 5 times. So not too bad for week 1. Sally's never done this before. In week 2, we have some more formative practice, and then we have another summative, and she shows her instructor that she can pack her parachute backpack 4 out of 5 times. So we can certainly see here that Sally is growing. She's learning. Week 3, more practice. She has her summative assessment. She gets 4 out of 5 again. So she's certainly showing some consistency here between week 2 and week 3. What happens in week 4? Oh, she's still 4 out of 5 times. So even with more practice, Sally's still missing some of the key parts to packing her parachute successfully. And at the end of the course, week 5, she's still at a 4 out of 5. So she's pretty good, but she hasn't hit that target of 5 out of 5. So let's leave Sally for a moment and go over to Bobby here. Bobby in week 1, Bobby's really struggling. He does the practice with his instructor, and at the end of week 1 for his summative, he's only able to pack his parachute properly 1 out of 5 times. So Bobby certainly has some growth to do. So Bobby enters week 2, and still he's 1 out of 5 times. That the practice has not been enough for him, so he might need some extra support along the way. So the teacher continues to work with Bobby, and we get to week 3, and oh my goodness, suddenly there is this exponential growth that extra practice between 2 and 3 on his summative, he shows he can pack his parachute successfully 5 out of 5 times. Let's see if he can maintain this. Week 4, he does it 5 out of 5 times. And then into week 5, he's still 5 out of 5 times. Okay, so we have 2 very different students who took 2 very different learning journeys. So the question is, if you were going to go parachuting today, who would you want to pack your parachute? So if you could just take a moment and open your chat, and you're going to write Sally or Bobby. Who would you like to pack your parachute? Thank you, Christine. Bobby. All right, yes, lots of Bobbies out there. Thank you. Yes, Bobby has shown in the last 3 weeks that he can actually do this consistently. And since this is our life at stake, right, we're going to trust Bobby. Now just pause for a moment. If we were to use averaging, which is the system that we were used to, look at what would happen. Bobby would have a 68%, and Sally would have a 76%. So if we were to translate those into letter grades, we can see that both 2 students have different grades, and Sally has the higher grade. But yet Bobby, in the last 3 weeks of his course, was consistently able to show that he met the standard, where Sally actually was still struggling. So this is why we don't average. This is why we don't use mathematical formulas when we're looking at student learning. We want to make sure that the grade that students get on the report card and ultimately on the transcript reflects what they can do and what they know when they exit the class. Okay, so I hope that kind of helps explain why we don't do that. And so the question still might be, okay, but how do you still come up with that A or that A- or that B+? So I'd like to take a moment just to talk about that. So we use the term professional judgment when we're talking about grading. And so again, it's not a matter of just, that old story of throwing all the essays down the stairs and whatever lands on the bottom or the top is the one that gets the higher grade. Is that teachers are looking at all of the learning evidence in a class, right? They're looking at all that summative evidence, but they're also looking at the formative, the practice along the way, because the formative can help inform that final summative grades. So at the end of the day, let's imagine it's the end of the semester. Teachers are sitting in their course teams and they're looking at all of their student learning evidence, the data, and they're looking at that most consistent pattern of performance. So if we were looking at Bobby and we looked at those 5 weeks of learning, the most consistent pattern of performance was that 5 out of 5, even though in the first 2 weeks he only got the 1, right? He has met the standard consistently. Where if we looked at Sally, she grew a little bit. She had a consistent pattern of performance. It wasn't quite as exemplary as Bobby's, but it wasn't where she started. We're looking at the growth over time with an emphasis on the more recent achievement. And this is where teachers will sit with, excuse me, with students, and we'll look at more recently, how have you been doing on those standards? We also look at the level of rigor in the summative assessments. So it might be, let's say in January, there's kind of this big moment where a teacher was assessing a lot of standards. And then in February, we might have a smaller moment. So even though we're looking at most recent, there are moments when something might be weighted more heavily. Again, teachers are talking with kids about this and say that in these moments in time, these are kind of elevated of moments where we really want to see how you're doing. Teachers will look at the practice, at the formative performance, if more evidence is needed. And so I don't know about your kids, but my son and daughter will often come home and say, oh, it's formative, it doesn't count. And then my hairs get on end. I'm like, it does count because the formative is your practice for the summative. Bobby could not have gotten to 5 out of 5 parachute packing, right, if he hadn't done the practice in between. And sometimes a teacher can go back to that formative work and go, oh, I just don't quite have enough evidence on the summatives. Let's go back to the formatives. And if there's evidence to support a higher grade for the student, a teacher will always do that. We'll never use formatives as a punitive measure. And lastly, once we've looked at all of that learning data, we've looked at the most consistent performance over time. We've looked at most recent because that's kind of what a student can do right now. The last thing a course team will always do is go to our high school grade descriptors. We will share out this presentation so you can actually click this link to see those. I'll show you just a big overview here, but we actually sit with students and we go over these. These are also in every course outline in a teacher's Schoology page. But we're looking at, okay, if a student is getting an A, there's some key words around knowledge and concepts and some key words around the communication, problem solving, and critical thinking. So oftentimes when I'm sitting with kids and they're like, Mrs. Bennett, I really think I should have got an A- in this course, not a B+. We look at the learning data together. We look at the most recent, we look at the most consistent, and then we go to the grade descriptors. And I'll say, okay, if you think you're an A-, show me in your data where you've demonstrated a high level of knowledge and a thorough understanding of the topics, right? Where have you showed communication effectively? You've showed analysis of solutions. So we talk through that. And I know teachers do this with students as well. And this is a really helpful kind of last lens to look at student learning. Our course teams will actually sit together and trade learning data with the names off. So they might take Sally and Bobby, if I'm the teacher and I have all of their learning data, I'll pass that over to Josh. Josh will look at the patterns, the most recent, the most consistent, and he'll assign what he thinks the letter grade should be through the lens of the grade descriptors. And then the two teachers talk about that. And where there's a discrepancy, they actually sit and they review that. So please have assurance that this is not just some subjective, this is what I think. There's a lot of work that goes into the grades that we're giving our kids. Just one last point before we kind of pause and answer some questions. There were some questions about honor roll that came up in our earlier parent coffees. So yes, we do have honor roll, which I'm sure you had when you were in school as well. We have two kinds of honor roll. We have honor roll and we have head of school commendation. So to get on the honor roll, your child can have no final grade of a D or an F, and the GPA should be between 3.5 and 3.99. We have very academically minded students in our school who work incredibly hard to show their learning, and we have a large percentage of our students that make the honor roll. The head of school commendation is a little more difficult to get. This really is trying to differentiate the students that have met those standards versus those students that have exceeded. To get the head of school commendation, you need a GPA of 4.0 and a minimum 5 letter grades. And why we say that is that some of our courses are pass-fail, so those aren't calculated into GPA. But here you're basically looking at a straight A student to get the head of school commendation. About 3% of our student body is able to achieve this level of recognition. So that was a lot. I'm just going to open up my chat here. What we've now covered is some beliefs about learning, how those beliefs are different from when I went to school and how maybe when you went to school, how we look at grading and how we look at evidence. So at this point, is there any questions before we move on to the second part of the presentation, which is about our Schoology platform? So how many students received the head of school commendation? So last year, it was between 3 and 4%, depending on the grade level. Just a question with Jill. So Jill, you had just a question about how a teacher might show the learning. So that's one of the things that's really important. If you have specific questions about why a teacher might be doing something in a certain way, I do ask you to reach out. There may be a very good reason as to why teachers are showing some evidence of learning and maybe when they're not showing it. So Forrest has a good question about when we're evaluating grades, do we have a forced curve? So is there a maximum percentage in each grade? Great question, Forrest. We don't curve. Again, this might be different from when we were in high school and certainly university. We come from a position that all students can learn and will learn and can learn at high levels. And so my job, if I was teaching as a teacher, is to get every child to the absolute kind of highest that I can get them within the time frame I'm given. If all of my students meet the standards, they can all get the A, right? And Dave and I don't look at, when we look at grade distributions in class, that's always interesting, but a teacher would never be questioned if all of their students got an A. My assumption is going to be, oh my goodness, teacher's doing a great job making sure that everyone has their own learning journey. So no forced curves. Just a question about transcripts. And so if you remember earlier in the year, there's a few messages around the deadline is approaching about withdrawing from a class, dropping a class, or adding a class. And we do that because due to the number of hours that students need to spend in the class to get their credits. So if a student was to drop a class after the deadline, for whatever reason, they would get a W next to the course, and a W means a withdraw. And the question is, does the university negatively see that as, does it negatively impact my child? So the answer is no. We do a lot of work with the counselors on this, and a counselor will always explain the W in the letter that they write. And there's many reasons why a child might drop a class. And so don't be afraid of that. We just want to, I would just never want a child to feel they're so stressed out and they can't manage their course load, and it would be healthy for them to drop something. Do know the counselors can work with the child and can explain that. We have it happen every year, and we've never had any questions. Now, if there's lots of W's on a transcript, that might be a different story, but if we just have one, it can be explained. So thank you, Saba. This is a really good question. she asks, or he asks, I'm sorry, if grades are based more on the more recent, do you see kids not trying very hard in the beginning and then ramping up at the end of the year? So that, as we all, some of you wrote that in the grounding activity that we remember cramming, right? Maybe some, yes, but how I would answer that is, if I need to run a marathon in 6 months, I don't do nothing for 6 months and then run the marathon. I mean, I probably could get through it, but it's not going to be very pretty, and I'm not going to be very successful, and I'm probably going to come out with some trauma and injuries along the way. So the idea is that with the end in mind, teachers are creating experiences and creating scaffolds to help students get to the point where they can run the marathon successfully. So if a child doesn't do all of this learning, they're not going to be as successful here as they could be. And so that's maybe the best, hopefully that makes sense. Now, evidently, some kids are more gifted at some courses than others, and so maybe they can still be okay with not doing here. But then I imagine if they did all the learning and they were challenged along the way, and the teacher even sometimes extended the learning, just imagine what that end result would be. So again, it's about the grade for the kid, yes, but it's also about what they know and what they can do and how prepared are they for the next level, whether that be college or the next HKIS course. So a question from Alicia, am I pronouncing that correctly? She was just wondering, has the honor roll changed the requirements? And yes, 2 years ago, we changed the requirements for the honor roll. The head of school commendation used to be 3.66, and now it's 4. The reason we did that is we had over 90% of our student body on honor roll, and trying to remember, Mr. Loveland, I don't know if you know, a large number of our kids on head of school commendation. What happens is universities look at that and they go, what? All of your kids made honor roll? Like, how is that possible? What are you doing? And there's an assumption made that our program is too easy and that we're not benchmarking with other schools. So I understand that 2 years ago, prior to me coming, there was some research done about what other schools were using for honor roll, the criteria. And so we made those changes accordingly, so that making head of school commendation really means something, as does the honor roll.
Yeah, and let me add to that a little bit. At the end of the day, colleges don't put much into honor rolls at all. In fact, many schools have gone away, completely removed them. And so for us, we want to make sure that if it's an honor roll, it should be an honor roll. It shouldn't mean that everyone is at that level. It should be a distinct award. So again, I would say that as an award, it doesn't hold any weight with college acceptances. It's not something that colleges would look at the end of the day. They're going to look at what the classes the students take and the experiences that they've done over their time.
So just a couple other questions, and I'm going to pass this over to Josh. Carrie, you're asking a question about that kids at HKIS say that the classes here are easy compared to others. I'm not sure maybe where you're going with that. I would say that our courses, again, are benchmarked against other international schools. Our teachers understand the expectations. We would never want our students at HKIS to be disadvantaged because they're at HKIS. Like math, geometry class here shouldn't be harder than a geometry class at the American School in Japan or the International School of Bangkok. And so this is why we have standards that are published worldwide. Those curriculum standards come with outcome expectations, and that's how we assess our kids. Again, class to class, we're confident that teachers are working together. So this geometry class with Mr. Smith wouldn't be easier than this geometry class with Mrs. Tamarco, okay? So I hope you answered that question. Maybe one more question before we get going, Mr. Loveland, if you can help with this one. Just curious as to why we've actually changed the grade scale and that we don't have the full A+ all the way down to F with the minuses and pluses. So why not have a C+ or a B-? Can I pass it over to you, Mr. Loveland, or do you want me to answer that? I think actually he's also in another meeting here. So I'll go ahead. So one of the reasons is that we as a school actually don't feel that we can distinguish the difference between a C+ and a B- with any kind of integrity, to be honest. We all want students to be meeting those standards, right? We want them to be up in the B and the A range. And so this is why we don't do the pluses or the minuses. If a student is at a C right now, we're going to work to get them up to that B level using the rubrics that we give.
Yeah, and I would say that over time, we'll continue to look at those. We're constantly looking at our reporting system, and school-wide, we're looking at our assessment reporting system as well. And so, it's a constant move to make sure that that we're on the front edge of what's happening and how we represent student learning. Again, it goes back to what Carrie and then also what Tim and Josh were saying, is that at the end of the day, our grades need to represent what kids know and what they can do. And that's the most critical part. So making sure that we represent that correctly, although at times there may be a disagreement or a want for a higher grade because kids have worked hard, or they want a higher grade. But at the end of the day, that grade needs to really represent exactly what they need to, where they are as according to the grade descriptors.
Great, thank you. Okay, one last question. So it was back to the honor roll. What percentage of our students are on honor roll every year? So I actually have the data in front of me. So since we changed the requirements 2 years ago, last year, our grade 9 class, 70% of our students made honor roll. In grade 10, we had 63%. Grade 11 was with our old criteria. We had 60% on high and 9% on the regular, which is about a 70%. And grade 12, 70% as well. So you can see, even with the changing of the requirements, on average, 70% of our students are making the honor roll. Our kids are quite exceptional. All right, I am going to now pass it over to Josh, our science teacher and teacher tech coach, and he's going to walk through now Schoology. So if you are a Schoology expert, you are welcome to exit our session right now. But if you feel you might need a refresher on how do you find out how your child is doing before the report card, Josh is going to walk us through this. Okay, Josh.
All right, hi everybody. I'll just walk you through a bit about how we communicate learning, but also communicate updates through groups on our learning management system, Schoology. So when you log into Schoology, this is what your main page might look like. It has a very much like a social media feel. So you see the recent activity, and all of those updates, those are either pushed out by group leaders or teachers of your child's course. On the left side of the screen, you'll also see, or sorry, on the right side of the screen, you'll see overdue materials. So perhaps an assignment is missing, but then also important upcoming dates, whether that's a group event or an event in a class. On the top menu, if you click on courses, you'll see this grid-like view of all of your child's courses. For the most part, all courses will be listed there. If you want a comprehensive list of those courses, you can look to the right of your page and click on My Courses, and then you'll have a comprehensive list of all of the courses that your child is enrolled in. The next tab at the top is the Group tab, and if you click on that, you'll see again a grid-like view of all the important groups at the school that your child is a part of. Student leaders of clubs also have groups that they create on Schoology, and all of the updates that are created through these groups are also appearing on your recent activity on the main page. So this is an example of, if you clicked on one of your child's courses, what the main page would look like. A few things that I want to highlight. Right at the top of that material page, you'll quite often see a Zoom link if your child will ever need that. You'll also see folders that are quite often organized in terms of units, so units of study. And then you'll also see, I want to, before I forget, highlight the naming convention on some of our assignments that we use at the school. So formative assessments, you'll see the title of these assignments with the F in the brackets. So that represents formative assessments. But then if a teacher wants to highlight a summative assessment, so you can distinguish that from other assignments, that will be, you'll see an S in brackets next to that assignment. On the right-hand side of your page, you'll see upcoming dates. So you'll notice that there's a due date here for a formative assessment. And then also summative assessments are, we like to give our students lots of time in advance, of course, to ensure that they understand when those summatives are going to be taking place, so they have an opportunity to prepare for them accordingly. Yeah, so a bit about communication. We at the high school would prefer that you reach out to your child's teacher using email as much as possible. I think that's the best way to communicate. If you have small maybe concerns, or you want to share any information about your child, we are more than willing to read these emails, and quite often we really enjoy getting to learn a bit more about your child, maybe through your lens. But if at all possible, reach out early to your child's teacher. I think that's the best route to go in terms of communication. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like when you click on the grade button. So grades on the left side of your Schoology page, and what that might look like. So I first want to highlight that assignments fall into 3 categories. So we have approaches to learning, we have formative assessments, and summative assessments. So if you look at that highlighted box number 1, that's where you'll see those 3 categories. If you click on those arrows next to those categories, you can also see an expanded list of all those assignments. Column number 2, this is where it might get a little bit tricky. I just want to mention and reiterate that those numbers that you're seeing, like if you're looking at 3 out of 3 and 2 out of 3, those don't correspond to a letter grade. It's not like a 2 out of 3 is a 66%. If you see that icon, that box icon, that number is just representing a score from a rubric. So if you see that orange arrow pointing up, you'll notice that this teacher used a rubric to communicate learning relative to the rubric. So you'll see that meeting expectations was checked for both of those boxes. I'll get back to this on the next page, but that's just something to be aware of. And then the third column, so the blue box, this is where you'll see comments from your child's teacher, and they're all in line with that specific assignment on Schoology. All right, so this slide, I'll be honest, there are a few things going on, and I almost sometimes feel like I need to be a detective to figure out these symbols, but I'll walk you through what this looks like on your child's grading page on Schoology. So sometimes teachers will use this orange symbol right here, which might mean that the assignment was missing, so it hasn't been submitted yet. A teacher could also click on missing when checked. I would imagine this is depending on the class, but both of those symbols mean that the assignment wasn't turned in when it should have been. Again, I'm going to go back to this box symbol right here. This represents that a rubric was used to assess your child's work. And just a reminder not to use that score 4 out of 8 to understand what went on there. I think it's best if you click on that rubric, you can look at how your child performed relative to the standards or learning targets. And then you'll see that there's going to be feedback either in the rubric or again on the far right column. And one more thing that I'd like to highlight on this page would be the 2 highlighted boxes at the bottom. So often teachers use quizzes on Schoology, and I think they're a really great way to assess student knowledge. So right now you're looking at a Schoology quiz, and this student had 2 attempts to complete the quiz. So the first score was 5 out of 10. The teacher said, well, I want you to try this again. So you had 2 attempts. The second score was 9 out of 10. So just a reminder not to try to translate that to a percentage and a letter grade. That just tells you a bit about how many questions were answered correctly on that quiz. And now we'll pause for a second and take any questions.
Thank you so much, Josh. I think parents, the best way to really start to understand how teachers are communicating in Schoology is to get into Schoology and to start clicking around into the courses, into the box that says grades, so that you can get a sense of how we're communicating this learning. A question that I sometimes get is, as a parent, how often should I be checking Schoology? So that's really up to you. We would encourage that be a family discussion and also age developmentally appropriate. So if you have a 9th grader, it might be that you're checking with your 9th grader a little more often, maybe once a week on the end of a Friday might be appropriate. That's something that I tend to do, and I tend to target my questions around, oh, I see some missing things here. What's going on? And then also around what's going well in the class? What do you enjoy and what are you struggling with? And if you are having struggles, what's your plan, right? Well, how are you working with the teacher on that? If you have a 12th grader, maybe once a week might feel a little bit too much. I mean, they are heading off to college next year where this is all theirs. But again, we do encourage you to look, because the teachers are doing so much work putting in those narrative comments. We don't do narrative comments on report cards for that very reason, that teachers are giving the comments along the way. So to put them on report card again really tends to be redundant and it's not timely. Okay, so let's go to some of the questions here, and maybe Josh, I'll pull you back in if I feel that you might be able to answer them from a teacher. So from Sonal, when we go to grades, there is a list of subjects and then session A, B, and C. What are they for? Oh, that's interesting, Sonal. I'm wondering if maybe you're seeing the timetable, because those would be, I'd have to, maybe Sonal, what you could do is just give me a screenshot of what you're seeing. As a parent, that's not something that I've noticed, the language of session A, B, and C. When you go into, let's say your child's taking AP Bio, when you click into AP Bio, you'll see the teacher and the course name at the top. And then along the left side, you're going to see some menu hot button items. And if you click grades, then you can go into grades and you should see formative, summatives, and approaches to learning. And if you expand those, you're going to start to see the learning data being populated as kids complete their assessments. Login issues. Yes, Andrew, as a parent who works at the school, I still have login issues. So please, at the end of the presentation, I do have the email, but you're going to use help@hkis.edu.hk. Thank you, Dr. Loveland. That is in the chat, Andrew, if you want to do that. That's our help IT desk downstairs by our library, and they are more than happy to help you out. So Jennifer's wondering, where do we find the narrative comments? So there may not be any yet, Jennifer, because we're still early in the year. Narratives often happen on the summative assessments. So those big kind of moments in time where we're asking students to consolidate their learning. So when you open your summative button in the grades, you'll see a list of the assignments. And next to that, you'll see narrative comments. Not always. It depends on which summatives a teacher's choosing to do narratives. Remember that the feedback's also being given to the child in the classroom. And so it's not always there, but you will see some narratives. And if you're not seeing narratives, I would just ask you to reach out to the teacher and just say, hey, I'm not seeing any narrative comments. Am I looking at a wrong screen, or can you help me understand my child's strengths and areas for growth? Yeah, and Josh is going to come in and build off that.
And just really quick, we're hoping that if you're looking at the grade page on Schoology on that far right, if you're wondering where those comments might be, like I know in my class, I would say, please see comments on perhaps like the paper assessment, or see my comments on Google Drive. All right, so not always are these long comments posted in Schoology, but the hope is that there is a quick comment directing you and your child to where those comments might be found.
Yeah, thanks for Josh. And that's really so that we're not having to write all these comments, let's say on an essay, and then as a teacher, I'm going and rewriting the same thing. So again, we're trying to encourage partnerships and you sitting with your child and saying, hey, Mr. Woods said there were some comments on your physics test. What were some of the things he said about your learning? So thank you, Christine. Is there narrative comments on the report cards? So at this point, we don't have narrative comments on our report cards. You will see the ATLs twice a year, and then the approaches to learning. And then the other 2 times at the end of the semester, you will see a course description and you will see a letter grade. So that's why it's really important as parents, just once in a while, to pop into Schoology, just to take a look at the running comments, to take a look at those rubrics, like Josh said, expand that little grid icon that you see. Those rubrics are great because on the left side, they actually outline the standards or the outcomes for that assignment. And then they show where the child has reached, right? Are they exemplary? Are they proficient? Are they meeting? Are they developing? It gives you a really nice eye into the strengths and areas of growth for your child. So Sanal sent me a screenshot. I'm just going to see if I can open that or not. Oh, Mr. Loveland, can you see my screen now that I changed it? Yeah. So Sanal, do you see this grades attendance, Mr. Loveland? Yeah, okay. So Sanal, you're seeing this. This is a list of all of the courses that your child is in. So this is one way that it's kind of like a summary of all the grades. So if you clicked into Chemistry Honors, you would then be able to see that. I think you're referring to session A, B, and C. Yeah, please ignore this. This is homeroom classes that allow us to take attendance. So there is no grading or feedback in homeroom. So you just want to be paying attention to the actual classes. So thank you for that. All right, now I have to try to find my presentation again. This is where it always gets a little tricky. Oh, that was good. Okay. So I think that is all of the questions. Again, if you have specific things that are maybe just relevant to you, don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. Just a few things about Schoology that I would really encourage is that you can actually log into your Schoology account and set your notifications. So as a parent, this has been really helpful. I imagine that you are just as busy as I am, and sometimes I forget to go into Schoology. If you set up your notifications in certain ways, you can actually get information that goes right to your email. So when you log into Schoology, if you go to your name in the top right corner and you click this little arrow, you'll have this expanded box coming. You'll see your children down here. So I have 2 kids, one in middle school, one in high school, so I can toggle between them both. But if you go down to number 2 to your settings box, that will pop up this box number 3. Where you see account settings and notifications. If you click into notifications, there's a whole menu here of what you can get notifications for. So for me, in just knowing my children, I turn on when course materials are overdue. So then I get an email when something is missing. And that prompts me to have a nice conversation. The other one I turn on is receive a private message. Most of our teachers don't use Schoology to communicate with parents. They use Gmail, but I turn this on just in case. And then that way I get a notification right away. But you can toggle through this. You can be as informed as you would like. But I do warn you, if you turn all of these on, you may be getting a lot of emails that probably aren't relevant to you as a parent. Also know that for those that are more phone users and love apps, you can go to the App Store and download the Schoology app. It's a nice way for on the go. Just be aware that, like many apps, there's not all of the content is available on the phone app, and I find it a little clunky, but it's available to you if you're someone that never uses a computer. And you can also go to the actual browser, go to your Safari or your Google Chrome on your phone, and you can get into Schoology with the web address as well. And this is the web address right here. And so if you just log into that and then use your username, which would be your first name dot last name, and your password. And I think, Andrew, you had said, oh, I don't remember my password, or I can't log in. The great thing is we only ever have one password for all of the HKIS parent accounts we have. So whatever you're using for DragonNet is what you would be using for this, and whatever you're using for PowerSchool, this is the same username and same email. So if you've totally forgotten, certainly do reach out to our help desk and we can get you sorted. As well, also know that you can do the same thing on your app. on your phone. You're going to log in with your first name dot last name. You're going to put in your password. And then if you are using the app on your phone, you want to input HKIS. So over here in box number 2, you're going to select the high school. So if you have kids in multiple divisions, there's different divisions you can pick. So for high school, you'd select high school, and then that will take you to our page or to your child's page. Just a note on Schoology is that teachers often post Google documents, or your child might post a Google Doc as an assignment. Those aren't usually shared with the wider community. They're just shared with kids who have an HKIS email address. So if there's ever a Google Doc that you open that you can't get into, best just to ask your child, hey, can you share that with me? I'd like to take a look. Or you can always email the teacher as well. And finally, if you require any technical support whatsoever, you can visit our help desk online, or you can email help, and they usually get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. If you haven't heard within that time, please just send another friendly reminder, and I know that they're more than happy to support you. Okay, we will be sharing out this presentation, and if you're interested in any of the literature that supports what we've talked about today, you could go to this last page. They're all hot links, and they'll take you to Dragonnet, and it talks through a little bit more about our learning philosophies and our learning policies. Again, parents, please, if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about today, or if you're in these documents, please just send an email to me. I'm more than happy to get on call and talk about learning. I think sometimes as parents, we're confused, right? Because it's different than when we were kids, and we're doing our best to support our children. And sometimes just sitting with someone to explain it maybe in a different way is helpful. So please don't ever hesitate to contact me. So today's outcomes were as follows, and we hope that you're leaving our hour in 10 minutes with a better understanding about our beliefs, about how students learn, that you have a better understanding of our grading practices, and finally, how we communicate learning in Schoology. That was our session today. This would have been so much more fun in person, and so hoping that we'll be able to see you soon on campus so we can do these things as more as workshops. I would like to put a plug in. We do have a parent coffee coming up. This is one that we just added Wednesday, October the 6th from 8 to 9. We're hoping we can be in person, so we put our location as to be determined. But this is going to be a great opportunity for you to hear from Dave, Lauren, and I about the high school survey data that we collected in the spring. These were the perception surveys. We sent surveys to kids and also to parents about how they're feeling about how we're doing as a high school. So we're going to share our successes. We're also going to share our areas for growth and how we plan to target those areas. So we hope that you'll be able to attend that. So I'm just going to go back to the chat to make sure I don't have any final questions. Christine, thank you for your thanks. Great, it's looking like people are feeling that they've learned something, so that's always great. There was a question about notifications to send you an email summary every week. That's a great question, Lillian. I'm not sure. It's something I can look into and get back to you on. And if I find that there is a way, I'll send that out to everybody. Okay. All right. Dave, are you available to say a close? I know he's managing multiple things right now. I think maybe he's actually he's in a board meeting at the same time. Dave is very talented. He can do a number of things. There he is.
Yes. So again, everyone, thank you for staying with us. And it was great to see so many people stay on also for the Schoology session. And as we talked about grade books. So again, make sure join us for the next parent coffee that we're just adding in October 6th. As Carrie was sharing, it's a great chance for us to celebrate, how we're doing these days and kind of the work that we're doing around all the data and all of your feedback when it comes into the school. So I want to thank Carrie, Josh, and Tim for this morning. And everybody have a great week and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Great. Thanks so much, parents. Have a lovely hot Wednesday.